to the Metal Command Podcast.
Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Metal Command Podcast. Tony here with you, and today I'm reviewing the newest Saxon album. It's entitled Hell, Fire and Damnation. Just came out recently, and here to talk about this new record by Saxon. Probably, in my opinion, one of the most consistent heavy metal bands over the last, say 25 years. They have really, when I think back on Saxon's discography, there really isn't an album I dislike. Even the albums that people, really kind of go back and say they hate, like the album Destiny or Rock the Nations, I really don't think those albums are as bad as quite a few people make them out to be. But Saxon, of course, I was really excited because for me, I got into Saxon back in 1997, 1998, when Unleash the Beast came out. That was my first exposure to them. It was right around when my radio show started, and I was able to meet Biff and get to see them here in Cleveland at the old Peabody's Down Under, which was down in the flats. For those of you from the Cleveland area, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. But Biff and Saxon, when I saw them live, now granted, I had the Unleash the Beast album, but I really hadn't listened to much of it. So my first exposure to Saxon was watching them live, and the band completely blew me away. And I got to sit on the bus with Biff and the rest of the band, and I was able to get to talk to him, get to meet him. I still have my autographed copy of Unleash the Beast, plus there was like a promo cardboard cutout thing that the band signed for me. Great time in my life, and they were one of the first bands I ever met. So I'm going to be honest, Carpe Diem was one of my favorite albums that the band has put out. And really from Unleash the Beast on, I think Unleash the Beast was like a game changer for them, because ever since that album, they got heavier. They've been getting better and better as time has gone on. And for the most part, when I go back and I look and back at like what ratings I gave all of their albums, to be honest with you, since Unleash the Beast, when I go back and look at the album ratings that I gave them, most of the album ratings are an 8 out of 10 to a 10 out of 10. So when I talked about Carpe Diem on the radio show back, a few years back, when that one came out, I believe I gave it a 9 out of 10. And very, very good album. The crazy thing is Biff Bifford's 72 years old and still kicks ass. I mean, the guy still has it live. They are just one of the greatest bands, in my opinion, ever in the history of heavy metal. So here we go. We have Hell, Fire and Damnation. Now, you guys saw the podcast a while back where I talked about this song, the title track song that they had released. I liked it. Kind of reminded me a little bit of the album Crusader, but a little bit more of a modern edge to it, obviously. But going into this album, I was expecting at least a decent record, but one of the things that did scare me at first was when I found out longtime guitar player Paul Quinn was not going to be in the band. And that sort of, you kind of get scared a little bit as a fan, because you think to yourself, how much of an effect is that going to have on the quality of this album? Because you have a guy that's been in the band, I believe he was one of the founding members of the band, but he goes back, over 40 years, right? And you think to yourself, well, damn, is that going to have an adverse effect on how the music is going to sound? And granted, when I heard about this member change, I think it was right before the first single, the title track off of this album, came out. So I was a little bit skeptical. Not really, but just slightly, because it's like, okay, is the album going to be a letdown? In a letdown, I expect most Saxon albums to be an 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. Is it going to be a letdown? Am I going to give it a 6? Let's check the album out. So the first song comes out, really dig it, finally get the album. I absolutely love the record. I think the record is good. Now, here's what and again, with Saxon, there really isn't much to say other than they haven't really changed their sound much at all for a very, very long time. But the albums always seem to sound fresh. They sound very good. And honestly, when I look at this album in general, I listen to it, I I will say this. I didn't like it quite as much as Carpe Diem. But I still, for me, I'll give the album an 8 out of 10. In all seriousness, 8 out of 10. It's very good. Carpe Diem, I gave a 9. I don't like it quite as much as the last album. But again, as I said at the beginning of the podcast, you know, it's like I look back, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10. I think a couple albums got 10 out of 10, 8 out of 10. I don't think I've ever given one of their albums below an 8 from Unleash the Beast and on. And now there's a couple records that came out in the 80s. You know, there's one in the 90s that I sort of, you know, kind of gave a like a 7 out of 10 to, or a 6 out of 10 to. But overall, you know, since Unleash the Beast came out and the Metalhead came out, you know, I'm going to be honest with you, all of their albums have been extremely consistent. And, you know, I've done videos where I talked about, say, the band Overkill being one of the most consistent bands in heavy metal. And Saxon's right up there. And one thing that always baffles me, and maybe people would want to leave a comment as to why they think this is, I am shocked this band isn't bigger than what they are. And to be honest with you, even when they were doing albums that kind of had a more commercial sound to them, say like Innocence Is No Excuse or Destiny, I mean, the albums actually were pretty solid, at least in my opinion back then. But this is a band that's had a tremendous influence on people over the years. You know, Wheels of Steel was just in Strong Arm of the Law, for example, two albums that a lot of people cite as a major influence on their music. And the other thing is, before I heard the rest of this album, when I realized Brian Tatler from Diamond Head was in the band, you know, my doubts kind of went away at that point, because first of all, I liked it, the single, and plus they ended up getting a guy from the same music scene, you know, namely the new wave of British heavy metal that, you know, Saxon came up with, because Diamond Head, obviously, for those of you that don't know, I think pretty much all of you do, Diamond Head, of course, is known for songs that Metallica covered. The song, you know, specifically the song Am I Evil? So, in general, I'm going to say that this is a great record. And even though they had one longtime member leave the band, I think Saxon, you know, still put out a pretty solid effort. You know, the title track is still a great song that I absolutely love. And, you know, I really love, you know, Pirates of the Airwaves. Witches of Salem is a great song. Supercharger's a great song. And There's Something in Roswell. Those are the tracks that really stood out for me on this album. And, you know, listen, folks, if you've liked what Saxon has been doing over the last 25, 26, 27 years, there is no reason why you are not going to like this album. And really, that is essentially why I'm really not going to spend a ton of time reviewing this. But let's call it for what it is. It's another good album. The band is consistent, and there really isn't much more to say aside from that. So with that being said, thanks for watching, and leave a comment. Let me know what you think of the new Saxon album. And if you do like the show, follow the show, of course, on Facebook, as many of you do. And of course, if you're on YouTube, hit the like button and subscribe button there. So with that said, thanks for watching. Stay metal.